This is the Voyage Report podcast, where you get the scoop on travel. Now, the editor-in-chief of the Voyage Report, Mark Albert.
Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome. Today, it's 24 for 24 at the Voyage Report podcast. We're celebrating our first 24 episodes by tweeting a podcast every hour of the day for 24 hours. If you've been listening these past few months, you know we've taken you around the world, meeting explorers and adventurers, dispensing travel tips, deals, advice, and hopefully inspiration. We've asked our guests their biggest personal discoveries while traveling, their favorite places, and the next place they're going. So today, we're going to bring you the highlights of our first 24 chats. And as always, we'd love for you to subscribe, download, rate, and review our episodes. It really does help us spread the word. We have a perfect 5-star rating on iTunes right now. Some of the comments there, and we really appreciate that you've left them. Some of them say very informative with interesting guest speakers. I look forward to this every week. Hey, thanks so much. We appreciate that one. Another one says, this podcast and the Voyage Report website have changed the way I travel. That's so gratifying. We're really happy to hear that. We now have 11 contributing journalists, and they're trying to bring you coverage, tips and tricks, and industry news from around the globe. So thank you so much. And of course, our e-course, which some of you may know, voyagereport.com/courses. Our e-course is an hour-long, really visual, interactive videos. They will teach you how to change the way you travel, how to find and book these cheap airfare deals that we do. Another review said, these are real people talking about their real experiences and giving real tips. We couldn't agree more. Thanks so much. Another listener wrote a review, just what I was looking for. Fantastic. Well, now let's take you back through the first 24 episodes. We began with the first episode on February 28th, the day before we launched the Voyage Report online. It's a welcome podcast, and I introduced who we are and what we're all about. But I found that I get more curious the older that I get. It's really amazing. And so I've wanted to keep exploring, but I've wanted to do it affordably. And I think that the central frustration people have, at least this was my central frustration, and the reason why people don't travel more. We hear, of course, that Americans take less vacation time than most other industrial countries. But I think the central reason is because people feel travel is too frustrating, too expensive, too time-consuming, too intimidating to research. I mean, if you want to go to France, if you want to go to Japan, where do you begin? You worry about the language. You worry about where you're going to stay. Am I going to be in a good neighborhood? How do I get to these sites, these places that I want to go? It can be intimidating, and some people think, oh my gosh, I need 2 weeks to plan this or whatnot. Listen, folks, I'm here to fact check this myth, and I'm here to tell you it's not true. You don't have to spend 3 weeks researching something. You don't have to be intimidated. You don't have to be frustrated. You certainly don't have to spend $5,000. You can do it cheaply, affordably. You can lift this weight off your shoulders, and you can make travel accessible for your budget, for your time. Well, we've been posting podcasts like we promised every Travel Tuesday since then, and we thank you for being on board. We are on the 8 most popular podcast platforms, which you can find at voyagereport.com/podcast. And we also post the full episode to our YouTube channel, so be sure to check that out. Next up, one of our most popular episodes of all time. This was only our second episode, and yet it's become one of our most popular. Star Chasers, traveling the globe to catch solar eclipses. This came out in March, and yet it's so timely because next month in August of 2017, on the 21st, as a matter of fact, will be the Great American Total Solar Eclipse. Historic, once-in-a-lifetime event. Everywhere in the continental United States, you will be able to see this total lunar eclipse. Of course, you want to be really safe about it and wear eye protection if you're going to look up, but it will be spectacular. And our guests were a couple from Minnesota, and they have spent 35 years chasing the globe to find solar eclipses. Here's a little bit about what they told us.
It's like night, but it's caused by this shadow of the moon, which is a big round shadow. And it casts this shadow on the earth. And when you look, you can look turn around 360 degrees, and in all directions you see a sunset.
Wow. That's
So
gorgeous.
yeah, so you have this like twilight dome over, and by the way, you can see stars and planets, depending on what planets are out. And then as you look at the horizon, in all directions, you see the pink, purple, yellow of a sunset.
Just so inspiring, so fantastic. Are you going to be watching the Great American Total Solar Eclipse on August 21st? If so, you'll definitely want to go onto our website. In fact, 1 month to the day before the eclipse on July 21st, we are publishing a whole article about discounts and deals all around the eclipse, and you'll also be able to find where you can get some of that eclipse eye protection that you'll need if you're going to go out and watch. It is going to be spectacular. Our next podcast was with Jeff Pegues, the Homeland Security correspondent at CBS News, and a good friend of mine. I used to work with him when I was there at CBS News for about 3 years. In fact, our desks were about 50 feet away. We had him on with a really timely topic, which was traveler security and tips. This is what he covers for a living. The travel ban, the electronics ban, it was all the topic of the day, very timely when we spoke for that podcast. And of course, there had been some recent terror attacks in Europe. Here was Jeff Pegues from CBS News.
Given the landscape in terms of what is happening around the world right now, you really have to pay attention to where you're going, in my opinion. I will never try to talk someone out of taking a vacation, going someplace that might be a little off the beaten path. Keep in mind, I grew up, and Mark, I don't know if you know this, but I spent about the first 13 years of my life living in Africa. And
wow, no, I didn't.
In different countries around Africa. I was in Zimbabwe, Zaire, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, so all over the continent, and it was an incredible experience.
Were your parents in the military?
My father was a banker, and so we traveled around Africa a lot. I lived in Paris for a little while. We lived in the Philippines. So we traveled a great deal, and it was an incredible experience. And so I will never tell any traveler not to go someplace. What I will say is that it is important to know the political atmosphere where you're going. And make sure that if you're a U.S. traveler, certainly you follow the State Department warnings and travel alerts. That's very important. Make sure that you're aware of your surroundings if you are in a public place. And I think that's really important these days in Europe, some parts of Europe, certainly, but anywhere. I mean, in this day and age, it is important that you pay attention to what's going on around you. Make sure that that as an American, frankly, you're not standing out too much. But it is important that you also get out and experience things. That's part of traveling, and that's why we do it. And it is important to explore. I mean, that's what I'm all about as a journalist. That's part of the reason why I got into this business, to see things, to experience things. And that's what traveling is all about.
Podcast number 4 was all about the PBS series that goes inside aviation, City in the Sky. And we spoke with the director, Russ Levin, and he joined us from Great Britain. And they went into this amazing system that's in the sky that keeps 1 million people airborne every single day. They went into an air traffic control tower. They went into a medical assistance room where they provide medical advice when there are emergencies on board. They took us into those cavernous cargo holds and those huge football field-sized rooms where they have all the baggage in the airports. Really fascinating. If you're an av geek like I am and just love the inside behind-the-scenes pass of aviation and seeing what it all looks like, you would have loved this series. Here's a little bit with Russ about what he told us putting together this incredible series on PBS.
Well, the idea really came from there was a group of us sitting around our desk at work, and we happened upon an article, and the headline of the article was, "Did you know that at any given moment there are 1 million people above your head in the sky?" And we just, apart from obviously the sort of slightly jaw-dropping nature of that figure, we were just got to thinking, wow, an entire city of people are kind of floating above us at any given time. And from that, we just thought, God, with that kind of scale, what on earth must it take to keep that kind of machine moving? What kind of myriad of networks must it take to keep that going and keep it safely moving and just churning through 100,000 planes every day which are flying through the air, and those 1 million people that are on them? It just posed so many questions about the myriad of networks that keeps that going. And so that was really the germ of it. That's where the idea was born, and it grew from there.
One of the most knowledgeable aviation reporters and columnists is the Wall Street Journal's Scott McCartney. He comes out with a column every Wednesday, and of course when news breaks, and we were so happy to get him as a guest on our podcast. We had him in talking about The Middle Seat, which is his column for the Wall Street Journal. He joined us on March 14th, and he was just so knowledgeable about everything in aviation and the current trends that are going through the industry, whether it be airline consolidation or these low-cost carriers that are now giving the big three here in the United States a run for their money for those transatlantic fares. Here's a little bit from Scott.
So I tried to put together something that was basically irrefutable. Hard numbers on things that matter to travelers. Which airline has the longest 2-hour tarmac delays? Well, that tells you a lot about how that airline operates. But that, for some travelers, that may be the thing that drives you most crazy. So we put together this collection of 8 different parameters. Figured out where we could get the best data from, and towards the end of the year, I get in touch with everybody and say we're doing it again, and everybody gets the data together, and I do a lot of number crunching with the government data that's available, and we try and do it in early January, just as a very immediate sort of results of the previous year.
Scott, you call yourself a columnist, but this sounds like accountability journalism to me.
Yeah. No, I think it's made a difference. I think it more than the DOT rankings and other things, because it is much broader than that. It has sort of given travelers a voice.
And of course, you're going to want to keep up with Scott's column every Wednesday in the Wall Street Journal. It's called The Middle Seat. On my journey to Morocco in late 2016, I went to Casablanca. And when I was in a restaurant, a really great restaurant, as a matter of fact, I started to chat with the gentleman sitting next to me. And he turned out to be an executive chef who travels the world restaurant to restaurant, cooking up some amazing dishes. And he was stopping in Morocco, and then he was off to Japan and some other places. And so I said, you know what? We're going to be starting this website about travel news and information, and we're going to be doing a podcast. Do you mind if I get a hold of you next year and we do perhaps a podcast together? And he said, sure. And so I did reach out, and we had Rob Shipman on our podcast talking about how he is a executive chef that travels the world in his global culinary adventure. Here's a little bit about what we cooked up with Rob.
When I'm standing in the restaurant area, I can quite often see guests at the table taking photos of things when they arrive. And some dishes, if it's a dish that looks good, then I can see they definitely get the camera out and I go, oh yeah, they're taking a picture of that one again.
Okay, so you have to be honest, Rob. Have you ever changed a dish to make it more photogenic?
Well, I'd say yes. I mean, basically, every time I make a new dish, normally it goes back to having the recipe in my head, and I'll have an idea how I'm going to make it and what it's going to look like. But then when I go to put it on the plate for the first time, sometimes I'll try it one time and then think, well, no, that's not quite right. Then I'll try it another way, try it a third way. Sometimes I might try it sort of 4 or 5 different ways to choose which way looks best. And not only that for the look, but the same thing with the recipe. With a new recipe, I might try it 5 times, 6 times, up to 10 different times, and each time I might adjust the recipe or the presentation until I find what's gonna be most successful.
I got so hungry when we did that podcast. Let me tell you, he had some wonderful descriptions and even gave us a recipe that you can make at home at the end of that podcast. You'll definitely want to download that. That was podcast number 6. For podcast number 7, we interviewed Ben and Maggie Bowman. They are a newlywed Chicago couple, and they were asked to participate in the pilot of a new Travel Channel show called Honeymoon Hunters, where they take newly married couples and they make them decide where they want to go on their honeymoon. Ben and Maggie had the choice of 3 different locations, and they explained what it was like to be on a reality show and maybe why it's not all it's cracked up to be when someone says, we'll pay for your entire trip for your honeymoon. Here's a little bit from our podcast with Ben and Maggie Bowman.
We lucked out because the producers were very kind to us. They took care of us. They fed us. They didn't run us into the ground. And I think they also did an excellent job shooting us well, so we didn't look, because you could edit us to look like a miserable couple.
Yeah.
I think that they did an amazing job highlighting the locations and highlighting us. We did have a lot of conversations with the producers beforehand because I think you want to make sure that you have some trust because you're putting yourself out there, and it doesn't take a lot for yourself to become a meme if you say or do something really dumb on TV. So I think they took very good care of us.
You are surrendering basically to the editors and to the producers, and you're giving sort of a little bit of yourself over to them. I mean, you're not in control.
Yeah. That's true. And when we looked at the legal before signing on, it basically said that.
And they are just great people. It was so wonderful to hear them. And if you haven't watched the episode, you can go online at the Travel Channel and look it up. It's quite fun. Don't watch it. And both of them were great troopers on that trip. One of the most well-known travel bloggers out there is Cranky Flyer. I love that name. Brent Snyder, who lives in Long Beach, California, is the man behind crankyflyer.com. He has legions of fans and subscribers. He even now has the Cranky Concierge, where he will help you with your travel plans. He was kind enough to join us, and boy, he's got such a great story. He started as a travel agent when he was still in middle school. He wasn't even in high school yet, and he wanted to be a travel agent, and he started booking travel deals and travel itineraries for his friends and family. I mean, really incredible. I don't know anybody else who did that when they were prior to being a teenager. Just amazing. And so we interviewed the man behind that popular aviation industry blog. He had some great stories and some great insight. What is the first thing they should do when they find out their flight's canceled?
So if the flight is actually canceled, if it's a storm, you might just be worried that it might be canceled, but that's a different story. So if the flight is canceled, you really have a few different options that come to you immediately. The first is you can get a refund. If you don't need to take the trip, then don't deal with this insanity. Just walk away and know that you can get a full refund if your flight's canceled for that. But let's say you do need to take the trip. So then it just becomes a matter of how soon do you need to be there, and how much money are you willing to spend. So depending on the airline you're flying with, you're going to have different options. For example, if you are American, if American cancels a flight, they can put you on United, but they can't put you on Delta because the agreement between American and Delta ended. If you're on Southwest, Southwest can't put you on anyone. Spirit won't put you on anyone, some of the low-cost guys. So it really just depends. So what you want to do as a passenger is, if you're at the airport, get in line. Can't hurt. Just, talk to someone, get in line. But while you're there, get on the phone. Call up reservations. They can help you just the same. and try and get to a person who can help you as quickly as you can. If you book their travel agent, your travel agent can help with that as well, which, with Cranky Concierge, we do that all the time. We'll see a problem coming and we can just put a new flight in the reservation right there, and handle it that way. So it just depends kind of who you've booked through and how you do it. But find a person who can help you.
Brent Snyder from crankyflyer.com. Thanks for coming on. Definitely go and check out his website. For the next podcast, podcast number 9, we were so pleased to be joined by a 27-year-old who had just finished his round-the-world journey. He had taken several years to visit every country in the world. I was so jealous of Henrik Jeppersen because I want to do that. I want to be to every country. But while I've only been to 55 countries at this point, he has now been to all 198. And that's not all. He has more places he wants to go, territories, other goals. Here's a little bit with Henrik about his journey, why he did it, and what's next for him. What would you advise them to do as they travel?
Depends on the budget, but negotiate on Airbnb is one good advice. Otherwise,
so don't just take the rate. You say actually contact the owner and negotiate.
Yes, they don't like, if there's any Airbnb owners listening, I think I saw an article, they're quite tired of this, but not that many people know about it, but maybe it'll become more known, because before they'll just receive maybe an email when people have booked, but now I think more people are getting aware that you can just negotiate and ask them. They can just press no, but they will probably receive a lot more requests now that people come to know about this option on Airbnb. You have to click contact host and then just ask if they can get a low rate, and then if they accept, they send a new link where you can book with a lower price on.
Oh my gosh, so Henrik, this is amazing. So how many times have you done this?
Well, I haven't used Airbnb that many times because I have tried to stay in hotels nowadays just for more privacy, but and more comfort, because I've done this, stay with local people for so many years, and you just don't have that much of time because you also need to spend time with them. But for entire place, which you can do on Airbnb, is really good, especially for monthly rates. So that's a little bit different out of what you ask. But I have got really cheap monthly rate out of Airbnb. Like especially in Denmark, I was back for some time. I got much lower rates than if you just paid the daily rate. Savings of, I don't know, four times less maybe by paying a monthly rate. Wow. Compared to if I just the normal monthly discount they have, and you just contact them, and if they're not expected to have more than a few bookings in that month, it's much better for them to have the place occupied. So that's a really, really good tip. Maybe I shouldn't share it because then everyone's going to do it. But,
no, our listeners are very grateful that you did. I have actually never tried that. So watch out, Airbnb. I might try that next time. Have you ever wanted to get rid of your house, put all of your belongings in storage, or just give them away, and hit the road for good? Well, that's exactly what Andrew Blackman and Jeannie Austin did. They are a nomadic couple living a life on the road. We interviewed them for podcast number 10, and of course they were on the road, and they told us about some of the places they've been where they only intended to stay a few days and then ended up staying a few months, and what it's like to be a couple on the road with no permanent address. Do you have any regrets? It doesn't sound like it.
No, none. Well, if I do have a regret, it's that we didn't do it sooner. That really would be it, because it actually has worked out very well beyond our expectations, I would say, because when you kind of just launch out into this sort of life, you don't know what the challenges will be until you're actually in it. But it has been quite easy. I mean, there are challenges, obviously, like any other life, there are challenges, but it's worked out extremely well.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't. That is a slight regret, though, is that we didn't do it earlier, because I think it is different when you're younger. You can travel in a different way. Like I remember when I was 18 or 19, I went backpacking around Peru, and it was you just have so much more energy then, and you're also open to many more things that now, as I'm 40 years old now, and now I think back and I think, oh my God, I would never do that. Some of the places I stayed in, and some of the foods I ate, and some of the, I went walking up in the mountains one day with no plan, and it just things that were just really bad ideas. But I think it's kind of good to do it sometimes when you're young, as long as you have a little bit of luck on your side.
If you've ever thought about doing that and just giving it all away and moving up on the road, you'll want to listen to that podcast, because Andrew and Jeannie certainly lay out a path for how it's possible, how you can do it, and how you can make it work financially. Our next guest was Mitch Summers. So inspiring. He is behind a new company called The Unexpected Journey, and they are a video project. They are asking #Are you awake? Are you really awake in life and experiencing all that it has to offer? They are going off to the Philippines at the end of 2017 to start shooting their video journey. And I actually met up with him a couple of months after this podcast in North Carolina, where he lives, and we had a great chat. We're going to try to do some more things together as the year progresses, but he is so inspiring for what he's been able to put together and what he's been able to do. He now has several partners in this adventure, and he tells us about the unexpected journey and how you can take part.
In 2011, I had a slight run-in with a near-death experience. I was hiking with some friends, slipped off of a ledge. It fell about 20 feet, and long story short, I was very lucky to still be there. My friends thought, oh God, there he goes. He's gonna die. So at any rate, I started looking at my life like, wow, life is brief. People, I could go at any minute. So that's when I started looking at really what I wanted to do in life, because I was just getting my wheels spinning in corporate America, and finding I was doing great financially, had a good job, had the car, had the place, but I just felt a little empty inside. So that was like a wake up call for me. And I wouldn't say that the unexpected journey was born then, but maybe a few years later it led to that. When I was doing some soul searching on what I really wanted to do in life, and what impact I wanted to make. So fast forward, and then the unexpected journey started, at least as an idea, in 2014. And everything takes longer than expected, and we're just now ramping up for pre-production.
If you plan to fly through the West Coast's main aviation gateway in the next few years, you're going to want to listen to podcast number 12. LAX, Los Angeles International Airport, is now the 4th busiest airport in the world, and they are in the midst of a $14 billion, that's billion with a B, modernization. They are changing all kinds of things, from terminals to concourses to how you even get to the airport, to all kinds of different things. It is a major project, and one of the biggest kickoffs to that was Moving Day in May. It was billed as one of the largest airline relocations in aviation history. They moved dozens of airlines over the course of several nights in the wee hours of the morning so that they can make it more user-friendly. And of course, if you've been through LAX, you know that it can get quite crowded. So we had two of the officials in charge of both Moving Day and this large modernization project on our podcast in May to tell us all about it. So here is a little bit from them about what you can expect. The airline called this one of the largest terminal moves in aviation history. I mean, no pressure there, right?
Well, that's very true. We have never experienced anything like this. And as far as we can tell, no airport has ever attempted to move 21 airlines amongst their terminals over a 5-day period. So that explains why we have done so much advanced legwork on this to make it run as smoothly as we can.
And what's keeping you up at night about Moving Day?
What's keeping me up at night is the things that we don't expect. We've tried to check off every box that we can think of. Anything that might happen, we're ahead of. But it's always the thing that you didn't expect that will cause the problems. And so, we're trying to make sure that our employees have the information they need, they have the authority they need to get through those unexpected things. But again, we'd ask our passengers to be patient and to expect those unexpected problems.
Since our podcast aired, we have updated on VoyageReport.com everything about the LAX modernization and what you can expect when you travel. Just go to VoyageReport.com and in the search bar, type LAX. You'll see everything that comes up. Our next podcast was with a remarkable woman who was living in New York City, the professional life, and decided to give it up to try and couch surf her way around the world. It's called the Nomad's Oasis, and Celine DaCosta is the inspiring woman behind it. With her journey, 70 strangers she met in 17 countries, all couch surfing. Here's what she told us about.
And another way I've also realized, and this has helped me immensely in subsidizing my travels, is that bartering is also a way of negotiation. So, for example, money is not the only currency that exists. There is social currency as well. And that is literally what I've traveled the world on is social currency. And for example, if I had a set of services, I have a strategist background, I have, a pretty good following on social media, and I create content. I'm a writer. I have all these skill sets that maybe, for example, a tour business needs. Maybe they need some sort of promotion or some sort of help with their social media. You just offer it. Hey, give me this tour for free. I'll help you out. Like, it's about the same, give or take, about the same value. So why don't we just do this thing for each other? I get a tour, you get some help, and it's no sweat both of our backs. So negotiation it's not just like, give me A and I want B and let's settle on C. It's more like, what is the dynamic here and how can we help each other? And is there a potential for a relationship in the future so we can continue helping each other?
Listeners, would you couch surf your way around the world, not knowing anyone, just trying to find those connections on social media? Definitely let us know. We will check in with your journey. Speaking of journeys, what about Nathan Sermonis? He is really on a journey of his own. He and a team of other people have built a green sailing ship, a renewable energy-powered sailing ship, and they are off on a global journey. They've gone down the East Coast, going to Cuba as well, and it's part of the Victoria Energy Expedition. They want to bring awareness about what they're doing, and Nathan was on our podcast to tell us a little bit about it.
I idolize, the Shackletons and the Magellans of old, but I think that there's still a whole lot to understand that is not necessarily well documented and told on a broad level to the general public. And so while I wish I was discovering new continents and things that are so monumental to the direction of civilization, I think that something that is as small as understanding the distribution of innovative, forward-looking energy technology and uses of local resources to power people's lives, I think that telling the story about how widespread that is around the world in really surprising places, not only distant far-flung destinations like Cuba or others that I'd mentioned previously, but even in our backyards. It's just this hidden reality that we want to promote and raise understanding about. And so that's why we consider ourselves also of the explorer stripe.
Even if you don't plan to journey the world on a green sailing ship, if you do plan to go out of the United States, you're going to need a passport. Well, this podcast, Podcast 15, was all about this year's passport surge. It's been 10 years since a lot of people had to get a passport because new rules required one for visits to Canada and Mexico. Well, guess what? In 10 years, your passport expires. So millions and millions, an estimated 20 or 21 million people now have to renew their passports this year. That could mean longer waits. Our next guest, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Brenda Sprague, joined us to explain what her department is doing to try and deal with the surge. They've added overtime and hours, and they're really determined not to make the mistakes of 10 years ago. The Deputy Assistant Secretary of State was very generous with her time and very candid, admitting that they dropped the ball a decade ago, which led to long lines, long waits, and really, really frustrating frustrated travelers. So she joined us for this podcast to talk about how she's doubled staff now to handle the 2017 passport surge.
In 2007, when the Department of Homeland Security rolled out the first phase of the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative, which was the first time American citizens were required to show a passport when they returned from travel to Canada, Mexico, or certain countries in the Caribbean, we experienced an unanticipated and unprecedented deluge of applications. We actually processed about 18.6 million passports that year. We were not ready. The customer service was, to put it mildly, terrible. People waited a very, very long time. Well, 10 years later, these passports are coming up for renewal. This time we were determined to be ready, but nevertheless, it's a lot of work coming at us.
I bet, and I appreciate you being so candid with our listeners about the experience 10 years ago. I remember an LA Times article. I'm from Los Angeles, and there was an article I just found a couple of days ago from 2007, and the headline was, Demand Surge Delays U.S. Passport Applications, and mentioned that waits were up to 10 weeks, sort of double the normal 4 to 6 weeks. And it actually had pictures of lines of people lining up early in the morning before the offices even opened to try and get their applications processed. So going forward, are you adding staff? I mean, how are you preparing for this specifically?
Well, to be honest with you, we've been preparing for 10 years because we knew this was coming and we were determined that it wouldn't happen again.
When we publish this podcast, we also publish an accompanying article on our homepage. You can find it at voyagereport.com. Just go to the search bar and type in passport. We have all the information you need to know about where to go, who to see. And so if you need to renew your passport or apply for one for the first time, you're definitely going to want to check out this podcast and the article on our website. Jeff Orenstein is one of our contributors. He joins us from Florida, where he writes a lot of our Sunday columns for us. Simply Smart Travel is his company. And he joined us and talked about why he got started with the whole business and how he shares tips, trips, and tidbits for savvy travelers.
My best practical tip I learned the hard way by lugging huge suitcases over European cobblestones, and that is travel light. Take everything you think you want to pack, lay it out on a bed, and put half of it back. And then take a good hard look at what you have left. Unless you're going to some wild and exotic places, there are stores, and if you forget something, you can buy something. You have to remember that you're going from place to place, and people don't remember what outfit you were wearing yesterday because they didn't know who you were yesterday. So you can even wear some of the same clothes, and you can launder it if necessary in your hotel room sink. So travel light.
We mentioned a bit ago that we had on Scott McCartney, the middle seat columnist for the Wall Street Journal. Well, we wanted to give the New York Times, their competitor, a shot, too, to be on our podcast. So we interviewed Lucas Peterson. He writes the Frugal Traveler column for the New York Times. He's also on Eater, a host of some of their episodes there. He finds the most amazing places and foods to eat. And he also helps you plan your trip so that you don't bust the budget. Lucas Peterson from the New York Times joined us for podcast number 17.
Part of the joy of the job is to sort of let people know that you can score that, round trip fare to Europe for $300-something sometimes. And I think people are really shocked by the fare wars between and sort of these new discount carriers. So it's nice to see, I think people have, international travel particularly, people have tended to think of it as something of a luxury product, which it is, but not to the extent I think that a lot of people think it is.
Right. You mentioned the low-cost carriers like Norwegian that have certainly put down pressure on those airfares from the legacy carriers. And, when I talk to people, too, everyone thinks you have to spend $1,500 per ticket and all of this stuff to go to Europe or something. And it's really incredible, the fares that we've been seeing in the last year or two.
I completely agree with Norwegian, with WOW, with I'm trying to think of some other ones that fly to LA.
Isn't there a new
TAP.
Level is a new one, right?
Right. Is that the British Airways one?
Yeah, out of I think San Francisco. I'm not sure about LA.
Yeah, and combine that with the current exchange rate, with the euro and with the pound, it's, there's really no better time to go.
Speaking of trying not to bust the budget, we interviewed a man by the name of Gary Schindel. Gary is the president of the National Speleological Society. Speleological meaning caves, or the study of caves and karst. He talked to us about cave exploration. This was fascinating, and he sent us some images of caves that he has come across, both here in the United States and overseas. We put them up on VoyageReport.com. He wrote us a guest column, and we put those images with that column. You can find it just by searching for the word caves. He came on the podcast to talk all about it and how you can find your local grotto or cave club to try to get you into cave exploration. And he had a few tips for what you will see. What is it about caves that captured your imagination?
Well, that's an excellent question. I guess it's the interest in the unknown. Most of the mountains, certainly the highest mountains on the planet, have been climbed, and the oceans have been explored, and there's not a lot of land surface left that hasn't been trampled by humans in most places. And to get to even more remote areas requires a significant amount of time and budget. But there's a huge unexplored area under our feet, and so it doesn't require a lot of necessarily a lot of time or money, and offers the opportunity, even for just weekend visits, to do original exploration.
It seems as though it's sort of captured your fancy here, and that it's always something new.
Some people may call it an affliction, yes. But it also offers a unique lifestyle.
I know when I fly, I always have a ton of questions about the airplane, about turbulence, about frequencies, about what's going on in the cockpit. Well, our guest for Podcast 19 was so kind to take our questions and our listener questions. Charlie Schaefer is a commercial airline pilot for several decades, and we had a whole podcast called Ask the Captain. Commercial pilot takes your questions. We had a wonderful discussion all about flying and aviation, how aviation has changed through the years, and also about some of the controversies in those viral videos we've been noticing from on board, fights with passengers or a passenger being dragged through a plane and all that other stuff that we've seen. He weighs in on all those topics and more in this podcast.
I have 5 rules of aviation. 1 is don't scratch the paint. 2 is to show up on time. The 3rd one is to stay out of the newspapers, now all media. Yeah. The 4th one is to play well with others, and the 5th one is stay out of your chief pilot's office.
Oh my goodness! I think those rules can apply for almost any workplace. They seem like good rules to live by. I mentioned earlier that one of our most popular podcasts so far was podcast number 2, which was all about the Great American Solar Eclipse that's coming up, the total solar eclipse. Well, for podcast 20, we were so fascinated by a NASA briefing that they held 2 months before the eclipse with all kinds of scientists explaining what you're going to see, what it means, what they hope to get out of it for research and study, that we decided to broadcast some of this briefing with NASA scientists, and they all explained the rare phenomenon and how you can watch it and how you can do so safely. Here's a little bit from the NASA briefing.
You know, during our busy lives, sometimes we forget that we're sitting on a planet that's turning on its axis with a celestial body right next to it that was ripped out of the planet really late in its formation, our moon. And everything is bathed in the gases and the fields of our star, the sun. The most important star for us because it gives us life. It is supporting everything we do, but it's also the Rosetta Stone of all stars. What we learn about stars, we first learn here at the sun. So the eclipse is important because these bodies come into alignment in a cosmic moment that we're all being part of. And see, these cosmic moments when nature speaks to us in an emotional way sometimes come loud, like thunderstorms, storms, like hurricanes, earthquakes, but this one will be silent. All of a sudden, day will turn into night and back again, and the world around us, animals, will react to it. This emotion is really important. You should talk to anybody who has seen such an eclipse. And, for me, the story that I remember is my grandma, who told me that story of her experience. She's not a scientist whatsoever, about experiencing that eclipse and how she was feeling how important that moment was. She talked about birds, about animals around. And I really hope that all of us, all of you who are watching this, will in fact go enjoy this eclipse.
So fascinating. I don't know if you're planning to watch the solar eclipse. If you're in the United States, you really have no excuse on August 21st, midday, not to go outside and look to see if you can see the eclipse. It's going to be spectacular, and you probably won't get another chance to see it. So you're definitely going to want to check it out. We're going to have more coverage for you on this eclipse, as I mentioned a bit earlier. On July 21st, we'll have a whole bunch of sales and deals surrounding the eclipse. That'll be on VoyageReport.com, along with coverage right around August 21st. And even though I want to go to every country in the world, it wasn't really in my top countries to get out of the way real soon. But when I found a really cheap fare on VoyageReport.com, of course, on our deals page, VoyageReport.com/deals, it was $452 round trip, $452 round trip. And I decided, well, let's go. And so I went, and I was blown away. This was the hidden gem of the year for me. Really just an amazing country in Europe. I recommend that everyone go. Castles and fortified churches and forts, and it just was magical. My guide for 2 of those days in Transylvania, the home of Dracula, was Adrian Ungureanu. And he was so fascinating that we did an impromptu podcast in the middle of the square in Cebu, Romania. And so you can hear all the people around us. And it was wonderful. He has a company called Wise Transylvania. He was everything you could ask for in a guide and more. And we talked to him for our podcast we called Destination Romania, the land of Dracula.
You can experience authenticity and essence. We have genuine buildings. We can talk about 14th century buildings. You can touch 13th century fortresses. You can look at castles that are amazing. I mean, there are a lot of essence. Unfortunately, it's not so well promoted, but we have a word here in Romania. The best promotion, the best marketing, it's from mouth to mouth. From word to word. Translated is like it sounds like this. Yes. So don't be afraid to come in Romania. Everything is very safe. You're gonna be amazed. By far, all the clients that I had and all the people that I've met, they were amazed. I mean, their expectations were different. They were lower, and after they came here, they discovered Romania, and it looks like everything was just fine.
Well, and to be honest, Adrian, I didn't know what to expect in Romania. I mean, I had actually never really considered it as a destination, although I want to get to every country, so eventually I would have come. But I found the deal on our deals page, voyagereport.com/deals, and it was a deal for $452 round trip, and I thought, oh my goodness, that's fantastic, I'm going to go to Romania. And just like you've mentioned, everything is so old and authentic. I mean, when you put your hand on a cathedral that was built in the 1400s, I mean, you really feel the history in your fingertips. I highly recommend Romania. If you ever get a chance to go, you are going to love it. And it's so cheap. When I went, it was really extremely affordable. So if you find that airfare to Paris or London or Vienna is too expensive, go to Romania. You will not regret it. We have a whole top travel tips in 2 minutes video on Romania and a whole page. You can find that at voyagereport.com/destinations. Our next guest for Podcast 22 was a professional mountain biker and media athlete. He is a star on social media. Mark Matthews, otherwise known as Marky Math, joined us to talk about what it's like to be a pro mountain biker as he's traveling the world. He had just gotten back from an amazing trip to Turkey where he was mountain biking where I never knew you could. And he was also talking about his trip to go mountain biking in Tibet. Here's a little bit more about his adventure on 2 wheels.
Yeah, for myself, I just want to get out. I want to discover more of the world, and I want to inspire more people to get out and ride bikes because it's such a cool way to see the world and experience life. And yeah, like just even if it's not like doing crazy tricks and going to like extreme landscapes like we do, even just like inspiring the average person to get out there and ride your bike somewhere when you're on vacation and explore the world like at a different pace. It's really cool what you can see from a bike and how much ground you can cover in a short period of time.
Thanks again to Mark for joining us. Our next guest was Eric T. Wynn. Talk about inspiring. He just became the youngest person ever to visit every country on Earth. We told you earlier we had a podcast with a Globetrotter who is 27 years old. Eric is 24, and I think it was 152, 153 days. He broke the record by 1 month, and he tells us about all the adventures, and some of it was quite scary. Being robbed, a gun pointed at him, and at one point his family wanted him to come home. He told us why he stuck it out and went to all 198 countries.
My parents really wanted me to go home because throughout this whole trip I've run into quite a few dangerous situations, and my mom and my dad were just like, Eric, just go home. Like, this is ridiculous, like all the stuff that you go through just to try to visit every country. But I think like deep inside me, I still wanted to continue, even though the journey was tough. And at some points, it was really heartbreaking and stuff. But the thing about me, I just hate to give up on stuff. So I did rest for a couple of weeks to get better from the malaria, and then I pushed on. Although it was really difficult, I will give the situation that.
When you say heartbreaking, did you mean tough because of the incidents that we talked about, or was there also some loneliness or some homesickness?
I did feel, well, both, because I also felt I missed my mom and my sister a lot, especially when I traveled for so many years, like without getting to see them too much. And I also met so many amazing people in my journey. And I guess the toughest thing was having to say bye to all the people that I meet and having to miss somebody from like different parts of the world, with the fact that it was just tough to get to see everyone all at once. Like there was always somebody that I missed in some part of the world.
Eric was so inspiring. In fact, he's going to be back in his native Vietnam later this year, and I'm going there to teach for a couple of weeks, so we're going to get together and chat about his next adventures. He wants to go to a whole lot more places and territories. He's not done yet. Even though I think he's already gone through 6 passports, he's got more to go. And that wraps up the first 24 for 24. Our first 24 podcasts. Listeners, what did you think about those 24? Have they inspired you? Did they put a smile on your face? Have they given you new tips for when you journey around the world? Please let us know by rating this podcast, giving us a review, and sharing it on social media. We have guests every week talking about travel news and trends, so be sure to subscribe to our podcast. We'd sure appreciate your review. It helps bring more awareness to our independent journalism and original content. And if you have an idea for a future guest on our podcast, please reach out at voyagereport.com and let us know. Thanks for joining us today on 24 for 24. I'm Mark Albert. Bon voyage.
You've been listening to the Voyage Report podcast. Get the scoop on travel at voyagereport.com.